if the fruit is misshapen, like sell it anyway. Like let's feed people. And if it's spoiled to where people can't eat it, we need to feed it to livestock. And then after that, if we can't get it to livestock in time for it to be eaten, we need to use it for industrial processes. So you can use coffee chaff to grow mushrooms. You can use, corn pieces to make myceliated blocks and actually make architectural stuff. You can use food waste to make biogas and heat homes, run vehicular fleets, and make electricity. There's a lot of industrial uses for this stuff. You can use like the byproducts of industrial processes. And then after that, you should compost it. The last thing you should do is send organics to a landfill. Composting is the second to the last thing you should be doing. Then there's another organization called the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and they created the same hierarchy, but they took the composting piece out and they split it out into 3 parts. And they said that the first thing we should be doing, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, ILSR. And they said that if you're composting, if you've already exhausted the other things, if you haven't fed it to people, livestock, or done industrial stuff with it, and you're composting it, first you need to compost it locally. You need to compost it in your home, in your yard, like in your local, in your apartment complex or block. And then outside of that, you can scale up and go like community scale, where you're not using like a big truck. You might use a small truck, but ideally you would just use like a hand cart or a bicycle trailer or something like that to move it somewhere really close, less than 3 miles away, and compost it in a larger scale facility there. And that's what Big Reuse in the Lower East Side Ecology Center and Earth Matter and the Big Reuse at the Gowanus site are doing. But with that, so once you have the commercial scale, if you need to step up from that, then you have the industrial scale, and that's usually at a regional level. So like when New York City had the brown bin, it was shipping all its waste upstate or out of state to big, huge industrial scale processing sites, which actually create a little bit inferior compost because they don't, the way that it's managed, it off-gases more greenhouse gases, which means there's less carbon, solid state carbon, if it's processed in big batches. The bigger the pile, the more anaerobic it gets in the center, which means that
more rotting.
Yeah, the more rot that happens as opposed to decomposition. So there's like, there's different ways. There's thermophilic and mesophilic, and then there's like bacterial fermentation and mycorrhizal decomposition. But in the end, the more anaerobic it is, and less it has like an effective microorganism solution that's fermenting it, then it creates greenhouse gases. So in the creation of that greenhouse gases, it's losing carbon to the atmosphere, which is less solid state carbon in the compost, which is what we want in the soil. We want to recarbonize our
carbon.
So we can sequester
carbon
it.
sequester, yeah.
And carbon sequestration actually feeds the plants, and it deepens the richness of all life on Earth, because we're a carbon-based life form planet. But when we put it in the atmosphere, it ends up causing greenhouse problems, and
gases.
Excess gases go into the ocean waters, which in turn
kills life forms.
Yeah, it kills life forms it changes the salinity and pH, which kills life forms, and it actually changes currents and exacerbates the climate problem.
Yeah.
So we really need to be recarbonizing, and in order to do that, we need to compost locally. And there's lots of ways to do that. And I'm not going to sit here and say which one is best. It all depends on community. But I think that we have to try pilot programs with different ways of doing it in different communities and work it out. We can't